Why did they stop at her row? The question cut through the silence like a blade. Passengers froze, forks hovering above half-eaten meals, conversations strangled mid-sentence. The steady hum of Flight 247's engines seemed louder now, vibrating through the narrow cabin as if amplifying the tension. Row 6. That was where she sat. Harper head leaned lightly against the cold airplane window, eyes half closed in a fragile attempt at sleep. 3 days without real rest had hollowed her out. She wasn't just tired, she was brittle, like glass about to crack. Her fingers twitched as the first heavy boots hit the aisle carpet, not the soft shuffle of flight attendants, not the casual, uneven steps of passengers heading for the restroom. These were deliberate, heavy, coordinated, a squad moving as one. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then snapping wide when the dark silhouettes filled her view. Navy SEALs. She recognized the posture, the gear, the aura of men who had lived too long in the shadows of impossible missions. They weren't supposed to be here, not on a civilian flight, not surrounding her row as though she were the target of a manhunt. His breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded so violently, she thought everyone in the cabin could hear it. The leader raised a fist, the universal sign for silence. And silence obeyed. Passengers who had been murmuring seconds earlier went deathly still. A child whimpered. Someone's phone screen dimmed to black, trembling hands fumbling to put it away. The entire cabin seemed to shrink inward, every gaze cutting toward one point. Toward her. Shifted in her seat, her pulse hammering. Not again, she whispered under her breath, too soft for anyone to notice. But the words weren't meant for them anyway. They were a confession, a fragment of a nightmare repeating itself. Because this wasn't the first time she'd been cornered. The man at the head of the team stepped closer. Broad shoulders, jaw like stone, insignia glinting faintly under the cabin's muted lights. His gaze met hers, and for one paralyzing heartbeat he didn't move. As if he were staring at a ghost. Then came the whisper, low enough for only the nearest operator to catch. It's her, she looks just like him. Froze, she wanted to demand an answer, but her throat closed, just like him. Who? She didn't need to ask. The answer pulsed through her veins. Her father. Commander Harper. A name buried years ago under a folded flag, a shallow ceremony, and words carved into stone that she had never believed. A man declared dead but never truly gone. Not in her memory. Not in the unfinished questions he left behind. The SEAL leader finally spoke aloud. Harper. Her chest constricted. Hearing her name in that voice, disciplined, measured, edged with steel, felt like lightning striking too close. She flinched. Then slowly she nodded. No point in lying, they already knew. The man's jaw tightened. He gestured. 2 operators eased backward, guarding the aisle while the rest remained around her, an unspoken wall. Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You need to come with us quietly. There are people on this plane who want you gone before we land. Gone, the word stabbed deeper than it should have. Swallowed hard, eyes flicking instinctively across the rows. To strangers, she was just another passenger, pale, restless, maybe anxious about flying. But now, under the weight of those words, every person looked different, suspicious, dangerous. Her gaze stopped 3 rows back. A man in a charcoal suit, polished shoes, tie perfectly adjusted, but it wasn't the clothing that chilled her. It was his eyes, too sharp, too calculating. He wasn't panicked like the rest. He wasn't curious. He was waiting. And when his hand slipped inside his jacket, his blood ran cold. Passengers screamed, ducking instinctively. The SEALs reacted instantly, one lunging forward, pinning the man against his seat, another yanking the jacket aside. No gun. A badge. Black, engraved with a symbol hadn't seen in years. Not since she was a child, sneaking into her father's study, tracing her small fingers over a file she wasn't supposed to touch. The insignia was etched into her memory. Black Talon, the mercenary syndicate her father had sworn to dismantle, the same syndicate rumored to have orchestrated his death. And now their operatives were here, on this plane with her. The SEAL commander's face darkened. I knew it. Black Talon operatives are on board. His stomach twisted. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't random. This was a hunt, and she was the prey. Her knuckles whitened as she clutched the armrest. All those years of trying to build a normal life, hiding in plain sight, pretending she could outrun the shadow her father left behind. And now the shadow had caught her. She didn't ask for this war, she didn't want it, but wanting didn't matter. The restrained operative smirked, lips curling as though amused by the chaos unraveling around him. His voice dripped venom. You're already too late. She won't reach DC alive. His skin prickled. Fear burned in her lungs, but beneath it something hotter began to rise. Anger. Anger at the faceless enemies who had stalked her since childhood. Anger at her father for leaving her with questions instead of answers. Anger that innocent passengers, terrified, crying, clinging to one another, were now pawns in a game they didn't even know existed. Her hands trembled, but her voice, when it came, was stronger than she expected. If you want me, fine, but they don't deserve to die for it. Every head turned. Some passengers stared in awe, others in disbelief. Even the SEAL commander's expression shifted, if only for a moment. He placed a hand firmly on her shoulder. Your father once said the same words before a mission that saved thousands. Froze. The lump in her throat was sudden, suffocating. The echo of her father's voice, through another man, another lifetime, hit her like a tidal wave. Maybe she wasn't as unprepared as she thought. Maybe survival wasn't about training manuals and weapons drills. Maybe it was about blood. Before she could process the thought, the restrained operative spasmed violently. His smirk collapsed into a grimace. Foam bubbled at his lips. Recoiled. Poison. Silence before he could say more. Passengers screamed. The cabin filled with panic, but the SEALs didn't flinch. They'd seen this before. Pressed herself back into the seat, her pulse erratic. If one operative was here, others would be too. The man's last words echoed like a curse. She won't reach DC alive. The lights flickered. The plane jolted hard, throwing a few passengers against their restraints. Oxygen masks dangled for a split second before retracting. The pilot's voice cracked over the intercom, forced and strained. Ladies, and please remain calm. We're experiencing interference with navigation. But knew better. This wasn't turbulence. This was sabotage. Her father's enemies weren't just waiting for her on the ground. They were already inside the sky, inside the plane itself. And somewhere deep in her chest, where fear and fury tangled into something unbreakable, Harper made a silent promise. She would not die in row 6. Not tonight, not before she found the truth Harper had left behind. The hum of the engines no longer felt steady. The cabin no longer felt safe. And as the SEALs braced for what came next, leaned back against the window, eyes burning with resolve, whispering words no one else could hear. Dad, what did you leave for me? What happens when the sky itself turns against you? That was the question every passenger silently asked when the plane lurched again, dropping just enough to wrench a scream from the cabin. Luggage shifted. A drink cart toppled. A baby wailed. The crew fought to steady themselves, trying to project calm, but their voices cracked with the same fear everyone felt. And Harper sat frozen in row 6, her heart thrumming in rhythm with the trembling fuselage. The Navy SEAL commander crouched beside her, voice sharp, controlled. They've hacked into avionics. The words weren't shouted, but felt them echo in her bones. Hackers. Black Talon wasn't just brute force. They had precision, reach. a way of turning steel and circuits into weapons. She pressed her palms against her thighs, trying to ground herself, but the fear was clawing at her edges. If they could take over the navigation, they could take over everything. The restrained operative lay slumped now, lifeless, foam still staining his lips. A message, realized. Black Talon silenced their own, not out of mercy but control, to show that loyalty ended with usefulness. Passengers stared in horror, whispering in fragments, "What's happening? Who is she? Why are soldiers here?" Wished she could answer them. She wished she could say she was just another civilian caught in the wrong storm. But deep down, she knew that was a lie. This wasn't random. It had never been random. The SEAL commander tapped his radio, whispering into a channel couldn't hear. Then he looked at her, really looked at her. "You're the reason they're here, not the passengers, not us, just you." His words weren't cruel, they were truth. His chest tightened. "I didn't ask for this." "No one ever does," he said. Something inside her cracked at that. He wasn't accusing, he was remembering. She clenched her jaw, fighting the sting in her eyes. 3 days of running. 3 days of hiding in bus stations, cheap motels, airport terminals. 3 days of trying to convince herself she could still vanish. But you can't vanish from ghosts. Especially when the ghost was your father. Commander Harper, decorated, respected, feared. A man who led missions whispered about in classified corridors. A man who was declared dead but who apparently still lived in the eyes of these men. And who had left behind enemies that hadn't forgiven him. Tilted her head back against the window, closing her eyes for a moment. She saw him again, not the commander but the father. The lullabies he sang when she was little. Simple rhymes, soft and steady. They weren't the kind of songs other children heard. His voice always carried an edge, as if even in peace he was preparing her for something larger. At the time, she thought it was just the way soldiers learn to be gentle, with caution, with discipline. But now, the words returned with razor sharpness. The commander had told her earlier, "Your father once said the same words before a mission that saved thousands." And suddenly the lullabies weren't songs, they were codes. Her stomach twisted. Had he really hidden things inside her childhood? Coordinates inside rhyme, warnings inside melody. If so, then she wasn't just Harper's daughter. She was his contingency plan. The plane jolted again, this time harder, and gasps ripped through the cabin. The lights dimmed to a sickly red glow. The intercom cracked with static. "Ladies, and brace for." Then silence. His eyes shot to the front of the cabin. The pilot's voice had been cut. The SEALs stiffened, weapons raised but pointed low. Guns were dangerous here, a stray shot could tear through the thin skin of the fuselage. So they relied on presence, on readiness. Passengers huddled together, crying quietly. A man whispered prayers into trembling hands. Gripped the seat in front of her. Her knuckles were white, but she didn't feel it. All she felt was the pressure of being seen. The SEALs weren't just protecting her. They were waiting. For what? For her to remember. The commander leaned close. Did your father ever tell you anything? Anything strange? Numbers, phrases, names? Shook her head, panicked. "I don't know." "You do, you just don't realize it yet." She hated the certainty in his voice. She hated the expectation. As if she could summon memories on command, unlock her father's secrets like a vault. But deep inside, a fragment surfaced, a line of song almost forgotten. "North winds carry, west they fall." Her breath caught. It was nonsense, except not. She whispered the line, barely audible, and saw the commander's eyes widen. "Coordinates," he muttered. "It's in you." Skin prickled. She wanted to deny it, to shove it back down, but the truth was out now. She was the map, she was the lock. The cabin lights flickered again, and then chaos. Metal groaned. A deafening blast shook the rear of the plane. The smell of smoke, acrid and sharp, burned the air. Passengers screamed, clutching oxygen masks as they finally dropped for real. His ears rang, her vision blurred. And through the haze of smoke she saw them. Figures in black, dark-clad mercenaries boarding through a torn fuselage, using grappling rigs like predators crawling into a cage. Passengers ducked under seats, sobbing. Flight attendants froze, wide-eyed, useless against the storm pouring into the cabin. The SEALs moved fast. Brutal hand-to-hand combat ignited in the aisle, fists, elbows, knees, steel against steel. Gunfire was rare, muffled, restrained. They couldn't risk rupturing the plane further. Pressed low, covering her head, but her pulse wasn't just fear anymore. It was fire. One mercenary lunged for her, knife glinting in the red emergency light. Instinct took over. She grabbed the tray table, yanked it loose, and swung with everything she had. It cracked against his face. He stumbled, blood spraying. Froze, shaking. She'd never done that before, never attacked another human being. But her father's words returned, not in memory, but in marrow. If you don't fight back, you don't survive. Her chest heaved, her eyes burned. She wasn't trained, she wasn't ready, but she was alive. And in that moment, Harper realized something terrifying. She wasn't just her father's daughter, she was his echo. The fight raged, passengers screamed, mercenaries pressed forward, relentless. And as crouched low, her ears still ringing, her voice broke through the chaos. She shouted the rest of the lullaby. North 73, West 29. The words cut through like gunfire. The commander's head snapped toward her, eyes wide. That's it, that's the drop point. Didn't know what it meant. She didn't need to. All she knew was that it mattered enough for Black Talon to hijack a plane, enough for Navy SEALs to risk everything. And enough to put her in the center of a storm she could no longer escape. A mercenary grabbed her from behind, cold steel pressing against her throat. Passengers froze, the SEALs hesitated. The commander raised a hand, signaling them to hold. His breath came shallow, panic clawing at her, but beneath it the fire still burned. She stomped down on the man's foot, slammed her elbow into his ribs, and ducked just as the SEALs surged. The mercenary went down hard. Gasped, pulling in air that felt like knives. Her body shook, but she was still standing. Still fighting. And that was when the pilot's voice screamed through the intercom, ragged and desperate. Brace, emergency landing. The cabin tilted violently. The ground rushed up. Clutched the seat in front of her, heart pounding, as the world outside the window blurred into streaks of fire and darkness. No longer the frightened girl who had boarded Flight 247. But not yet the woman she would become. What does survival feel like when the ground finally catches you? For the passengers of Flight 247, survival came in the form of steel shrieking against concrete, the earth rushing up too fast, the world blurring through rain-smeared windows. The plane slammed onto the runway hard enough to throw screams into the air, masks swinging wildly, oxygen hissing from vents. Metal groaned, tires screamed. The fuselage rattled like a dying beast. And yet somehow the aircraft held. Harper gripped the armrest until her knuckles throbbed, the violent jolt tearing the breath from her lungs. Beside her, a woman clutched a child so tightly the boy couldn't cry anymore, his wide eyes locked on the chaos around them. The runway lights streaked past in blinding flashes. Sparks spit from the underside as the plane dragged to a halt. Then, silence, not true silence, but the after-silence of catastrophe. The kind where everyone breathes like they've been drowning, afraid to believe they're still alive. His chest heaved, air burning her throat. For one surreal second she thought it was over, that maybe, impossibly, they had survived. Then she looked around. The cabin was smoke-drenched, passengers sobbing, the smell of burned rubber and melted wiring thick in the air. The Navy SEALs were still upright, scanning, always scanning, even in the aftermath. Blood streaked one man's temple. Another's sleeve was torn, crimson soaking through. Yet their weapons were steady, eyes sharp. Because it wasn't over, not really. The commander crouched in the aisle, his hand firm on shoulder, anchoring her even as her body shook. "Stay with me. You don't move unless I say." Wanted to argue, to say she wasn't a soldier, wasn't part of this. But the words died. She had already fought back, already shouted the coordinates her father had hidden inside her, already stepped into a battlefield she could no longer pretend to ignore. The emergency slides deployed with a violent hiss. Flight attendants shouted instructions, voices ragged. Passengers surged toward escape, stumbling, dragging carry-ons they didn't realize no longer mattered. The smell of panic was overwhelming, sweat, fear, desperation. And yet, even in that chaos, the SEALs didn't rush. They moved with precision, securing a perimeter around, because to them, she wasn't just another survivor. She was the mission. Hated it. Hated the way their eyes darted toward her every second, the way passengers stared at her like she was both cursed and chosen. Hated that her father's war had finally branded her too. As they descended the slide into the stormy night air of Washington, D.C., legs nearly buckled. Rain slicked the tarmac. Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights streaked across the horizon. Emergency vehicles raced toward them, tires hissing. The moment her feet hit the ground, she thought she would collapse, but she didn't. Somehow she stayed upright. Her body trembled, but she moved. One step, then another. The SEAL commander stayed close, guiding her toward the flashing lights, his jaw tight, eyes unyielding. "Why me?" The word slipped out, barely audible. "Why am I still alive when he is?" It wasn't the time for questions, but it wasn't really a question at all. It was a wound. The commander's eyes flicked toward her, and for the first time she saw not just the soldier but the man. Tired, weathered, carrying ghosts of his own. "Because he made sure of it," he said quietly. "Everything your father did, it was to keep you breathing." His throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, tell him she didn't want this, didn't want to be the legacy of a man who had vanished into shadows and left her with enemies she couldn't even name. But before she could, another convoy of black vehicles tore across the runway, headlights cutting through rain. Doors slammed open. Agents in tactical gear swarmed. Their insignia wasn't SEAL, wasn't Navy. And felt her blood run cold. The symbol on their shoulders, a Talon hooked and sharp. Black Talon. Her stomach dropped. "Down," the commander barked, shoving behind him just as gunfire cracked across the tarmac. The night erupted into chaos again. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off metal. Emergency responders dove for cover. Passengers screamed, scattering like prey across the soaked runway. His breath came in gasps, her back pressed against the ruined fuselage. The SEALs fired back with controlled precision, but they were outnumbered. Rain mixed with blood on the asphalt, the smell of gunpowder thick in the storm. The commander turned to her, urgent. "Listen to me, they're not here to capture you anymore. They're here to erase you. You are the only key left to what your father buried. If you fall here, it dies with you." Her chest constricted. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the lullaby still pulsed in her mind. North 73, West 29. Her father hadn't trusted files. He hadn't trusted vaults. He had trusted her. And now Black Talon wanted to burn her out of existence. Another round of gunfire sprayed the tarmac. A bullet whined so close to her ear it felt like fire. Ducked lower, palms pressed to the wet concrete. Her entire body screamed to crawl, to run, to vanish. But she didn't. Because in the blur of gunfire and rain, she saw a child still stranded near the slide. Small, alone, crying. No one else noticed. Everyone else was too busy fighting to see. Her heart lurched. Her instincts, not soldier instincts, not training but human instincts, shoved her to her feet. The commander hissed her name, but she didn't stop. She sprinted across the tarmac, legs heavy, lungs burning, rain stinging her eyes. She scooped the boy into her arms just as another spray of bullets shredded the asphalt where he'd been standing. The child clung to her neck, sobbing into her shoulder. Turned, half expecting death to meet her, but the SEALs had shifted, creating a wall of fire between her and the advancing operatives. One of them yanked her behind cover, shouting, "What the hell were you thinking?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her chest heaved, throat raw, but her eyes burned with something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Her father's blood ran in her veins. Not just the violence, not just the war. The instinct to protect, to fight for someone else's survival. The commander locked eyes with her, and this time there was no question, no hesitation. "You're not running anymore," he said. Swallowed hard, the weight of his words crushing and lifting her at once. "No," she whispered, "I'm not." Sirens screamed louder. Reinforcements poured in, not all friendly. The runway had become a battlefield. And somewhere in the smoke, rain, and fire, Harper finally understood the truth. This wasn't about her father anymore. It was about what came next. The war Harper started wasn't over. And now it was hers. What happens when you step off the battlefield, but the war follows you anyway? Harper learned the answer on the soaked tarmac of Washington, D.C., with sirens echoing through the night and the smell of gunpowder still clinging to her skin. They had survived the crash landing. They had survived the firefight. But survival didn't feel like victory. It felt like postponement. The SEALs hustled her into a waiting vehicle, doors slamming shut as bullets continued to echo across the runway. The convoy roared away, tires hissing against rain-slick pavement. Sat pressed against the cold window, chest heaving, her hands still trembling from clutching the boy she'd carried to safety. The child had been swept into the arms of paramedics before they fled. She didn't even know his name, but she knew she would never forget the way he had clung to her neck, sobbing into her shoulder as if she were the only safe place left in the world. Her throat tightened. For years she had believed she was no one's safe place, just a daughter left behind, shadowed by a man who disappeared into silence. Now strangers looked at her like she was something else entirely. The commander sat across from her, his gear heavy with rain, blood streaked across his cheek. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried exhaustion. "You understand now, don't you?" he asked. Swallowed, her lips trembled before words finally formed. "Understand what?" "That you're not a passenger in this anymore. You're the target, the key. The reason men are willing to hijack planes and shoot up runways. Whatever your father buried, Black Talon wants it burned, and you're the last living thread." Stomach churned. She pressed her forehead against the window, watching the blur of city lights. "I didn't ask for this." The commander leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His tone softened. "Neither did we, but here we are." She closed her eyes. His words sank deep, bitter, and undeniable. 3 days on the run. 3 days pretending she could still live like anyone else. But there was no pretending anymore. Not after the lullabies had bled into coordinates. Not after men had died with her name on their lips. The vehicle turned sharply, diving into an underground ramp. They entered a secure garage, concrete walls swallowing the sound of rain. Doors opened. Armed men in tactical gear swept the perimeter. The SEALs ushered her into a stairwell, then down a corridor lit by harsh fluorescent lights. The air smelled sterile, metallic. Every door they passed was sealed with electronic locks. Finally, they entered a room that wasn't sterile at all. It was warm, dimly lit, walls lined with maps and photographs. A war room not in name but in presence. Stopped short. On one wall, pinned under glass, was a grainy photograph. Her father. Harper in uniform, jaw firm, eyes hard, but with the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. A smile she remembered but barely. His chest ached. She reached out without realizing it, fingertips brushing the glass. "He was our commander," the SEAL said quietly. "We'd follow him anywhere." She turned, eyes burning. "Then why am I here? Why not him?" The man didn't answer right away. His silence was heavier than words. When he finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. "Because he didn't make it back, and because he trusted you to finish what he couldn't." His knees nearly gave out. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. The weight was crushing. She wasn't trained for this. She wasn't a soldier. But she remembered the way she had swung the tray table against the mercenary's face, the way she had carried the child across the tarmac, the way her father's lullabies had come alive in her throat like they had been waiting for her all along. Maybe she wasn't trained, but maybe she was built. She looked up slowly, her voice trembling but clear. "The coordinates, what do they lead to?" The SEAL commander exchanged a glance with one of his men, then pulled a map onto the table. He circled a point, north 73, west 29. Leaned forward, her heart raced. It was remote, far north, a place where ordinary maps ended and white space began. "Greenland," the commander said, "deep ice territory, practically inaccessible without military transport." Frowned. "And what's there?" The commander's jaw tightened. "We don't know, but your father hid something, something worth killing for." Pressed her fingers to the map, tracing the coordinates. She tried to imagine her father standing in this very spot, planning, deciding. He had always seemed larger than life, untouchable. But he wasn't untouchable. He was gone, and in his place was her. The realization settled like fire in her chest. She looked up, eyes meeting the commander. "Then we go." He shook his head. "It's not that simple. Black Talon knows about the coordinates now. If we move, they'll be waiting." Lips parted, "So we wait." His gaze was steady. "We prepare." The room fell silent. Sat back, staring at the map. The coordinates burned into her memory. North 73, west 29, a place she had never seen but which now defined her life. She thought of the lullabies again, her father's voice, the warmth of his arms rocking her to sleep when she was too young to understand fear. He had left her the key, but not the instructions. Why? Her eyes blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. The commander studied her quietly, then said something that struck deeper than the rest. "You remind me of him, you know, the way you look around before you speak, the way you stand even when you're shaking. That's blood in you. You may not believe it yet, but we see it." His throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to say she wasn't like him, that she wasn't a soldier, wasn't a fighter, wasn't anything close to the legend they remembered. But a part of her, the part that had stood up on the plane and shouted against death, knew better. She was his daughter. And whether she wanted it or not, his war was now hers. The rain still pounded outside. The city still pulsed with danger. Black Talon operatives would be hunting, regrouping, planning their next strike. Sat in the war room, staring at the photograph of her father. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper, but the room heard it anyway. "What did you leave for me?" No one answered. Because the only person who could was gone. And yet in the silence, Harper felt something stir inside her. Not peace, not acceptance, but resolve. Her father had built her into this moment long before she realized it. Now she had to decide whether to carry the weight or let it crush her. What happens when silence feels heavier than gunfire? Harper learned that answer in the hours after the crash, sitting in a war room that smelled faintly of old paper and gun oil, surrounded by men who had followed her father into darkness and somehow lived to remember him. The adrenaline of survival had faded. Now came the weight. Her hands shook, though she hid them under the table. Her eyes burned from smoke and exhaustion, but she refused to close them. Every time she blinked, she saw the boy she had carried off the runway, the mercenary's knife glinting too close, the smirk on the operative's face as poison foamed from his mouth. Every time she blinked, she saw her father. The photograph on the wall, Harper in uniform, alive in frozen memory. The SEAL commander studied her from across the table, his jaw tight, arms folded. He hadn't spoken in nearly 10 minutes. Neither had she. Finally, he broke the silence. "We can't stay here long. Black Talon will regroup." Lifted her eyes. They felt heavy, swollen from unshed tears. So what now? He pulled a folder from his pack, sliding it across the table. "Now we move, but not until you understand what we're walking into." Hesitated, then opened it. Photographs slid out, blurred satellite images, hand-drawn sketches. Maps marked with red circles, coordinates scrawled in her father's handwriting. Her chest tightened. She traced one line with trembling fingers. She knew that handwriting. She had traced it before, as a child, when she snuck into his study. She used to follow the curves of his letters like secret trails. Now those curves pointed to a place at the edge of the world. "Greenland." The commander leaned forward. "Your father uncovered something there, we don't know what. Files suggest an installation abandoned, buried under ice. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially," he paused, "Black Talon wants it erased. That means it matters." Closed the folder, her stomach churning. "And you expect me to just go with you, like I'm part of this?" "You are part of this," he said firmly. "Whether you wanted it or not, you're the only one who can finish it." Her throat burned. She wanted to scream at him, tell him she was just a woman who had boarded a plane, not a soldier, not a spy, not anything close to the legend they remembered. But she remembered the lullaby, the coordinates spilling from her own mouth like they had been waiting there all along. And deep down, she knew the truth. Her father had made her part of this long before she understood. She looked away, staring at the rain-smeared glass of a high window. "What if I fail?" The commander's silence was heavy. Then he said softly, "What if you do?" Flinched at the words. They weren't encouragement, they were inevitability. The door burst open before she could answer. Another SEAL stepped in, dripping from the rain, his face grim. "They've found us." Black Talon operatives spotted 2 blocks out, drones overhead. The commander stood immediately, voice sharp. "Move her now." Pulse spiked. "Move me where?" He met her eyes. Somewhere they can't follow, somewhere cold. Within minutes they were back on the move. Down stairwells, through tunnels, into another armored vehicle. Sat wedged between 2 operators, her hands clenched in her lap, heart hammering. She watched the city flash by through tinted glass. Washington at night. People in restaurants, taxis in traffic, umbrellas in the rain. Ordinary life, just beyond her reach. She wondered if she would ever have it again. The convoy weaved through the city until it reached the river. A secure dock, floodlights cutting across black water. A helicopter waited, blades chopping the storm. His breath caught. She had flown in small planes before, commercial flights, never this. The commander guided her toward it, his hand firm on her back. "Greenland isn't forgiving," he warned. "Once we leave, there's no easy way back." Swallowed hard. "And if I say no?" He stopped, eyes piercing hers. Rain streaked down his face, but his voice was steady. "Then you'll be hunted until they succeed. And when they do, whatever your father fought for dies with you." The truth hit her like a blow. She looked at the helicopter, then at the city lights fading behind her. Somewhere out there, people were laughing over dinner, complaining about traffic, holding each other in warm apartments. She wanted to be one of them. But she was. Not anymore. Her father's war had stolen that choice. She climbed into the helicopter. The roar of the blades swallowed everything. Rain hammered the windshield. The city fell away below them, lights shrinking into distance. Sat strapped in, staring out at the darkness. Her reflection flickered in the glass, pale, exhausted, hollow-eyed. She barely recognized herself. The commander leaned toward her, his voice raised over the noise. "You're not alone in this. Remember that." She didn't answer, not because she didn't hear him, but because she didn't believe it yet. Hours later, the city was gone. The ocean stretched endless and black beneath them. The storm thinned, stars breaking through. Drifted in and out of uneasy half-sleep. Every time her eyes closed, she saw her father's face, then the mercenary's smirk, then the boy on the runway clinging to her neck. Fear and memory twisted together until she jolted awake. The commander was still awake, studying maps by dim light. His face was stone, but his hands rough, moved with surprising gentleness as he folded the paper. She studied him, hesitant. "Why do you still fight this war?" He looked at her, then back at the map. "Because Harper saved my life more than once, and because he asked me to finish what he started." His chest tightened. "He asked you?" He nodded, not with words, with actions, with sacrifice. "He carried us through missions no one should have survived. Men like him don't beg. They show you who to be when they're gone." Turned away, staring out at the endless ocean. She wanted to be angry, to hate her father for leaving her in this shadow, but beneath the anger something else stirred. Pride. Not the easy pride of parades and medals, the harder kind, the kind that came with scars and silence. And for the first time, she wondered if she could carry even a fraction of it. The helicopter thudded forward through the night. Hours stretched into silence. When the first hint of dawn broke, it wasn't golden. It was pale and cold. The horizon glowed faint blue, ice stretching as far as she could see. Greenland. Pressed her hand to the glass, breath fogging. The sight was alien, endless white broken by jagged peaks. Beautiful, terrifying, empty. The commander's voice cut through the drone of the blades. "Welcome to the edge of the world." His pulse quickened. She had thought the plane, the runway, the firefight, that was the storm. That was the war. But looking out at the frozen wilderness, she realized those were only the opening shots. The real war was waiting here. And her father's ghost was leading her straight into it. What does it feel like to step into a place where the earth itself tries to erase you? Harper learned the answer the moment the helicopter dropped them onto the ice. The rotors thundered one last time, whipping snow into a blinding haze before the machine lifted away, shrinking into the pale horizon. The sound faded, and then silence. Not the comfortable silence of a quiet room, the kind that pressed in from all directions, vast and merciless. Silence broken only by the groan of shifting glaciers and the sting of wind against exposed skin. Pulled her hood, breath fogging instantly in the frigid air. Her boots crunched against packed snow, each step sinking slightly, as if the earth wanted to swallow her whole. The SEAL team moved with practiced rhythm, packs strapped, weapons secured. They seemed unaffected by the cold but could see it in their eyes, even they respected this place. "This isn't just cold," the commander warned, his voice muffled under his mask. "This is a predator, don't underestimate it." Nodded stiffly, though her jaw ached from shivering. The air was sharper here, thinner, cutting deeper into her lungs. She had grown up in Virginia summers, sticky heat, cicadas buzzing. This was another planet. They began their trek across the ice. The coordinates, north 73, west 29, weren't a place you could drive to or even land directly on. They pointed to the middle of nothing, which meant days of moving through everything. Hours blurred, white stretched in every direction, featureless and endless. The horizon was a cruel trick, always near, never reached. Thoughts spiraled as she walked, the crunch of snow beneath her boots like a ticking clock. She thought of her father, of the lullabies, of the passengers whose lives had been ripped into chaos because of her. And she thought of the mercenary who had smirked at her on the plane. She won't reach DC alive. Well, she had, but now the question shifted. Would she reach Greenland's heart alive? Her body screamed in protest. Every step was heavier than the last. Her thighs burned. Her fingers numbed even under gloves, but she forced herself forward. She refused to be the weak link. As the day dimmed into a pale twilight, they stopped to make camp. The SEALs worked quickly, pitching insulated tents, digging trenches for wind protection, heating rations over small stoves. Sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, watching her breath drift in white clouds. Her mind refused to settle. The commander approached, crouching beside her. His mask was off now, revealing weather-beaten skin, ice clinging to his stubble. "You did well today," he said simply. Almost laughed. "I tripped twice, I slowed you down." "You kept moving," he countered. "That's what matters." His words lingered longer than she expected. She wasn't sure if he meant them as comfort, but they landed that way. Still, the question gnawed at her. "What if there's nothing out here?" she asked quietly. The commander studied her, then looked toward the horizon. "Then your father died for nothing, and I don't believe that for a second." His throat tightened. She wanted to ask more, to demand answers about Harper, about what kind of man he had truly been beyond the legend and the lullabies. But the words caught in her chest. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know if I'm strong enough." The commander's eyes flicked back to her. "Strength isn't a choice, it's a decision. You don't wait to feel it, you decide it." His tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't soft either. It was the voice of a man who had buried too many friends to waste words on comfort. Pulled the blanket, staring into the frozen dark. She didn't feel strong. She felt hollow, fragile, but maybe he was right. Maybe strength wasn't about feeling. Maybe it was about standing anyway. That night, she dreamed of her father. Not the man in photographs, but the man who tucked her in. His voice low, steady, humming a lullaby that had once seemed like nonsense. North winds carry, west they fall. In the dream, his eyes were different, sadder, as if he knew she would one day unravel the truth. Woke with tears frozen on her cheeks. The next day, the march continued. The landscape grew harsher. Cracks groaned under their boots. Ice cliffs loomed in the distance like jagged teeth. The wind howled, stripping warmth from their bones. His body screamed again, but she pushed forward, one step, then another. By the third day, the horizon shifted. A shadow emerged from the white, not natural, not random. A structure, buried under ice, only the jagged outline of steel and concrete visible. His breath hitched. The commander stopped beside her, scanning with binoculars. His jaw tightened. There it is. The installation. Harper's secret. The SEALs spread out, securing a perimeter. His pulse thundered in her ears as she approached the entrance, a rusted hatch, half frozen, covered in decades of snow. She pressed her gloved hand against the cold metal. It felt like touching her father's ghost. "Why did you leave here?" she whispered. Before anyone could answer, the silence shattered. Gunfire cracked across the ice. Dropped instinctively, snow exploding around her. The SEALs barked commands, returning fire. Shadows moved on the ridge, figures in black, weapons glinting. Black Talon. They had followed. His chest seized. She crawled behind the hatch, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the battle erupting around her. Bullets snapped through the air. Snow sprayed. The wind carried the screams of men falling. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to breathe. She wanted to curl into herself, vanish, but another voice echoed in her skull. Her father's voice. "If you don't fight back, you don't survive." The commander's voice cut through the chaos. "Get her inside, now." Two SEALs pulled at the hatch, straining. Ice cracked, hinges screamed. The door finally gave way, revealing a dark tunnel plunging into the earth. Hesitated at the threshold, staring into the abyss. Then bullets snapped overhead, one striking the hatch inches from her head. She ducked, heart hammering, and dove inside. The SEALs followed, slamming the hatch shut behind them. The world outside muffled instantly, replaced by the echo of their breath in the narrow tunnel. Darkness swallowed them, broken only by the flicker of. His pulse still roared in her ears, but something else stirred beneath the fear. She had crossed the threshold. Whatever her father had left buried in this frozen tomb, she was about to find it. And for the first time, she didn't just feel hunted. She felt chosen. What do you hear when the earth swallows you whole? For Harper, it was her own breath, ragged and uneven, bouncing back against concrete walls buried deep under ice. The hatch groaned shut above them, sealing away the gunfire, the screaming wind, the vast white wilderness. Down here there was only darkness. Flicked on one by one, beams slicing through the black. The tunnel stretched downward, frost clinging to pipes and steel, the air so cold it bit her lungs with every inhale. Boots scraped against frozen concrete as they descended. The sound echoed, too loud, like footsteps in a cathedral no one had entered in decades. The SEAL commander led, weapon raised, every movement sharp, precise. He didn't relax even now, especially now. Followed close, heart pounding. She wanted to ask him what they would find, what her father had hidden, why they were risking everything to reach this place. But the words stuck, because deep down she already knew the answer. Her father hadn't sung her lullabies. He had left her codes, not to comfort her but to prepare her. The tunnel opened into a chamber, wide, vaulted. Frost glittered like stars across rusted steel beams. And in the center of the room, a door. Massive, reinforced. A vault sunk into ice, sealed with a wheel lock from years of frost. His breath caught. She felt it in her bones. Whatever Harper had buried, it was here. The commander motioned for the SEALs to secure the room. Two covered the entrance, weapons ready. Others swept the perimeter, scanning shadows. He turned to, "This is it. Do you remember anything else from the lullabies? Numbers, words?" Her chest tightened. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to recall. Her father's voice low and steady. "North winds carry, west they fall. Where ice remembers, the lock will call." Her eyes snapped open. She stepped toward the vault, fingers trembling as she brushed frost from the wheel. Beneath the ice, faint markings appeared, letters etched into steel. E.H. Her initials. His throat closed. The commander's voice was quiet. "He built this for you." Her gloved hands shook as she gripped the wheel. It resisted at first, frozen in place, then groaned as she forced it. The sound echoed through the chamber, metallic and ancient. The vault door shifted, frost cracked, the wheel turned. And slowly the door creaked open. Cold air poured out, thicker, heavier, as though the room had been holding its breath for years. Inside, dim emergency lights flickered to life, powered by some long-forgotten generator. The space stretched deep, shelves, lockers, crates stacked high. But at the far end, resting on a metal table, lay a single object. A case. Black, heavy, marked with the insignia remembered from her father's desk. Her pulse thundered. She stepped forward, boots echoing on the concrete. Each step felt like a lifetime. She reached the table. Her fingers hovered above the case, trembling. She didn't want to touch it, didn't want to open it, because whatever was inside wasn't just her father's secret. It was his burden. And now it would be hers. The commander stepped beside her. "It's yours to open." Swallowed hard, her hands lowered. The latches were stiff, but they gave way under pressure. The lid creaked open. Inside lay files, hard drives, a leather-bound notebook worn in. His breath caught as she lifted the notebook. Her father's handwriting scrawled across the cover, "For." Her chest constricted, she flipped it open. The first page wasn't data, it wasn't coordinates, it was a letter. "If you're reading this, it means the war I fought has reached you. I'm sorry. I never wanted it to touch your life, but the truth was too big to bury alone." Her vision blurred, tears welling. She kept reading. Black Talon isn't just a syndicate, they are a machine, a shadow empire feeding on chaos. And I found proof, names, accounts, contracts tying them to governments that pretend to fight them. Expose this and they fall. Hide this and they grow stronger. I couldn't finish it, but you can, because no one suspects you, and because strength isn't something I could give you, it's something you already had. Pressed her fist against her mouth, stifling a sob. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He had trusted her, prepared her, believed in her when she hadn't even believed in herself. She turned the page. More names, documents, proof of Black Talon's infiltration, evidence powerful enough to shatter their empire. The commander's eyes scanned the files, his jaw tightening. This could dismantle them entirely. Before could answer, the sound hit. A low rumble. Distant but growing. Her stomach dropped. Black Talon. The SEAL at the entrance shouted, movement, multiple hostiles incoming. The commander snapped into motion. Seal the vault, defend the objective. The SEALs took positions, clutched the notebook to her chest, heart racing. The rumble grew louder, footsteps, boots, voices echoing in the tunnel. Then gunfire. The chamber erupted. Bullets sparked off steel, echoing like thunder. The SEALs fired back, controlled bursts, disciplined even in chaos. Ducked behind the table, clutching the notebook so tightly her knuckles ached. The sound of battle consumed everything, screams, commands, the metallic roar of war. She wanted to stay down, to vanish, to let them fight for her. But then she remembered the boy on the runway, the mercenary's knife, her father's words. If you don't fight back, you don't survive. Her hands trembled as she reached for the sidearm one of the SEALs had left on the table. It felt heavy, foreign, wrong, but also inevitable. The commander's voice cut through the noise. Get ready. Her pulse roared in her ears. She raised the weapon, breath shaking, and aimed at the shadows charging through the tunnel. One step closer. Two. Her finger squeezed. The recoil jolted through her bones. A mercenary stumbled, hit, not dead but stopped. Gasp, chest heaving. The world slowed for a heartbeat. She had fired, and she hadn't missed. The commander glanced at her, something fierce and proud in his eyes. Then he turned back, unleashing fire into the advancing shadows. The battle raged. Black Talon pushed hard, relentless, outnumbering the SEALs 2-1. Crouched low, reloading awkwardly, hands shaking but steady enough. She wasn't a soldier, but she wasn't helpless anymore. This wasn't just survival, this was defiance. The notebook burned against her chest like a living thing. Her father's words, his proof, his trust, all of it was inside her now. And she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Black Talon would not take it from her. Not here, not ever. What happens when a war built in shadows finally demands the light? Harper felt that answer burn in her chest as the underground installation shook with the violence of battle. Gunfire roared through the chamber, echoing against steel and ice. Sparks spit from concrete. Frost rained from beams overhead. The SEALs fought like men who had lived here before, in tight corners, against impossible odds, where the only currency was seconds. Black Talon poured through the tunnel, wave after wave, black-clad, merciless. Their voices were sharp, coordinated, feeding off fury. Crouched behind the table, clutching her father's notebook against her chest. The weight of it was unbearable and essential all at once. Every page, every word, every name inside was a blade against the empire hunting her. The commander's voice ripped through the chaos. Harper, listen to me. If we fall, you run. You take that book and you don't stop until the world sees it. Do you understand? His throat closed. She wanted to scream at him, to say she couldn't, that she wasn't built for this. But she had already swung a tray table against a mercenary, already carried a child through gunfire, already fired a weapon into the dark and watched her enemy fall. And her father's voice echoed again, steady and relentless. Strength isn't a choice, it's a decision. His jaw set, "I'm not running," she shouted back. The commander's eyes flicked toward her, sharp, burning, before he turned back to fire another burst into the advancing shadows. The chamber became a storm. Mercenaries clashed with SEALs in brutal hand-to-hand combat, knives flashing, fists colliding with bone. The air was thick with cordite, blood, and frost. One SEAL went down hard, blood blooming across the ice. Another staggered, wounded but still firing. Pulse thundered in her ears. She raised her weapon again, breath ragged, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil jarred her bones, but a mercenary fell. Another stumbled back. She didn't think, she didn't hesitate, she fought. Her body shook, her lungs burned, but something deeper carried her forward, not training, not instinct, but inheritance. Harper's blood. And then the storm shifted. A figure stepped into the chamber, taller, broader. The mercenaries moved aside instinctively as he advanced. Stomach dropped. His face was hidden under a hood, but his presence was unmistakable, the leader. The one who commanded the shadow war her father had fought. His voice was calm, deliberate, almost soft against the chaos. Harper. Her name on his lips sent a chill deeper than the ice itself. "You carry what your father died for," he said, "but you don't understand it, you don't know the cost. Give it to me and I will end this. Walk away and you can still live." His heart hammered, she clutched the notebook. Her father's handwriting, his trust, his unfinished war. She thought of the passengers on Flight 247, the boy on the runway, the SEALs bleeding for her now. And she knew this wasn't just about her. Her voice shook, but her words cut clear. "You'll have to kill me first." The leader tilted his head as if almost amused. "So be it." He lunged forward faster than she expected. The commander intercepted him, the clash brutal, echoing like thunder. Blows landed sharp, knives flashing in close quarters. The SEALs fought to hold the line, but Black Talon surged harder, sensing the moment. Ducked behind cover, flipping open the notebook with trembling hands. Pages blurred through tears. Names, numbers, accounts, enough to burn empires. Her father's last words scrawled at the bottom of a page. "Sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes the truth must outlive you." Her throat closed, she understood now. It wasn't about the fight. It wasn't about survival. It was about carrying the truth until the world couldn't ignore it. She looked up. The commander staggered under a brutal strike, blood streaking his face. Mercenaries pressed closer, overwhelming. His pulse roared, her decision crystallized. She tore the final page from the notebook, the page with the coordinates, the proof, the words for. She stuffed it inside her jacket, close to her heart. Then she grabbed the remaining files, the drives, the bulk of her father's legacy, and hurled them into the flames of a burning crate. The leader roared in fury, breaking free of the commander's grip. "No." The fire devoured the files, smoke curling into the frozen air. His voice cut through the chaos, sharp and steady. "You'll never erase this. It's in me now." The leader's eyes burned beneath his hood. For the first time, she saw fear flash there. He lunged again, but the commander met him, driving him back with a savage strike. The fight turned primal, brutal, echoing through the vault. Scrambled to her feet, clutching the single page hidden against her chest. The rest was gone, but it didn't matter. Because survival wasn't enough, truth had to outlive her. The battle raged until the chamber shook with a new sound. Explosions. Charges planted by retreating SEALs. The walls trembled, frost cascading from the ceiling. The commander's voice roared above it all. "Move now." The SEALs grabbed, dragging her toward the tunnel. She stumbled, her lungs burning, the page pressed tight against her heart. Behind them the chamber collapsed, ice groaned, steel screamed. Black Talon's leader vanished in the chaos, swallowed by falling debris. They burst through the hatch into the frozen air, the storm raging harder than before. The installation caved in behind them, the earth itself burying her father's secrets forever. Collapsed onto the ice, chest heaving, tears freezing against her skin, the SEAL commander dropped beside her, bloodied, exhausted. He looked at her, eyes fierce even through the storm. "Do you still think you're not strong enough?" His throat closed, she shook her head. "I don't know what I am, but I know what I have to do." She pulled the page from her jacket, holding it against her chest, the last fragment of Harper's war. The commander nodded once, not as a soldier to a civilian, but as one fighter to another. They rose together, the storm lashing around them, the ice endless in every direction. Harper had entered Greenland as a hunted woman. She left it carrying the last ember of her father's truth. And though the world might never know the cost, she knew the meaning. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.